As you know, uh, for me, the Holy Grail is that's not an expression that everybody's familiar with, but what we're trying to do is to have a working definition of maturity that we can operationalize, that we can use uh, to help ourselves grow. And I chose to call the class, Am I More Mature or Less Mature Than Others? So to understand where I am in the world of maturity, we need to obviously define what we're looking for. So I'm going to suggest that the high level definition of maturity is my connection to reality as Hashem knows that reality. So that's very, very high level. That means that the more mature person has a closer grip on reality as he approaches Hashem's grip, so to speak, on reality. So Hashem's grip on reality is infinite. It's what we might call the absolute grip on reality. Our grip on reality will never be absolute, but the maturation process is the attempt to try to get closer to Hashem's reality. Let's give some examples. One reality that we need to deal with is the fact that Hashem exists. Again, we'll never know what that means in its fullest sense, but a person who is trying to mature is always going to be working to try to internalize and recognize Hashem's reality increasingly in his life. Here's another example. A person needs to have a sense of his own tools in his toolbox. So, for example, if a woman does not know that she has an additional portion of Bina, that she was granted an extra portion of Bina. If she doesn't know that, then she's not operating close to reality because that is a reality. And if she knows that, then the next step is to be able to work with that. So, for example, if she has a Bina that a certain guest is not a good idea for the household, she should not try to explain that. It's coming from a place of Bina. It's an intuition. She needs to know that she has that in her toolbox, and she needs to know the limitations of that in her toolbox. It would be as silly as a woman not knowing that she's attractive. If she doesn't know that, then she can't work with that reality. So, knowing reality, getting closer to reality, means having a better and better sense of what's in my toolbox. From there, a better and better sense of what's in the general toolbox. So that would include the other person's needs, the other person's sensitivities. Included in my toolbox is my tendencies, my biases, my moods, my needs. If I don't know about those, then I am distant from reality. The more I try to think about and take into account my reality, the closer I come to aligning myself with the Ribono Shel Olam's reality. So if a person lives in a fantasy land where he imagines reality to be in line with his wish that reality should be such, he's not going to get very far in coming closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because when you're stuck in fantasy, you're not actually building a reality-based understanding or relationship with yourself, with others, with the world, with Hashem, with Torah, with mitzvos. If it's based on fantasy, then it is not grounded, and therefore it does not bring us closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the opposite of reality, and therefore perhaps you might even say the opposite of maturity, is fantasy. And Rabbi Yisrael Salanter made that case that Dimyon is the biggest enemy, that we are always trying to get closer to reality, knowing that we will never have the full reality, because let's say the full reality is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is knowing everything that ever was and ever will be, and what's the best for everything and for everyone, and that combination that we can't possibly access. But there's a reason why Roa Es Hanolad is an aspect of Chochmah, because anticipating how things are going to play out is a feature of reality. That doesn't mean that we can't be surprised. That doesn't mean that we can't even be thrown off when things don't play out the way we thought. But the idea is that we're thinking about it. That thinking of trying to get closer to reality is what the Navi refers to as hisboninus, where he cries about the fact, Yisrael lo yoda, ami lo hisbonan. Why didn't he stop to think? You say, well, who doesn't stop and think? And the answer is they didn't stop and think about what reality is. They stopped and thought about how they can get what they want. There's a huge difference. Thinking about how to get what you want, as attractive as that might be, is not going to bring you closer to reality. It might bring you closer to what you want. I'm not 100% sure. But it's certainly not going to bring you closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who is operating with absolute reality. So let's say, if I ask the question, am I more mature or less mature than others? So the first thing I need to recognize is that there are people who have a better grip on reality than I do. They are less prone to their moods, to their fantasies, etc. They are more in line with the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, meaning they see reality in the Torah, they see the reality that they observe around them, they see it in light of what the Torah, how the Torah wants us to see things. They see animals the way Torah wants us to see animals. They see plants the way the Torah wants us to see plants. They see children the way the Torah wants us to see children. They see non-Jews the way the Torah wants us to see non-Jews. They are increasingly in line with reality, and they are much more in line with reality than I am. But it's also true that there are people who maybe even haven't begun to think about how they can align themselves with reality. That they are always just looking to get what they want and not to align themselves with reality. Reality, of course, including this world and the next world. You know, reality is a broad term. So the ones who aren't even thinking about it, who are just trying to figure out how to make their lives comfortable and get themselves through life with the least amount of stress. So they haven't even begun. So I am more mature than they are. I can say that with confidence, not because I know what they would accomplish or what they could accomplish if they would stop and think. The Navi would be very happy. They would be among those who are mizbonein, who stop and think. What would get them to stop and think? Honestly, I don't know. But I will say that an encounter with people who are more thoughtful will always create a certain tension. That means that as a result of the interaction with somebody who is more thoughtful, who is thinking more about reality as it properly is, as opposed to as they would wish it to be, the interaction is going to lead to one of two things. Either the person who is thoughtful is going to be dragged down into the trivial life of the one who is not thinking and will become somebody who's also just trying to get what they want in life and will be reduced to childishness, or it will create a tension the other way. And there will be a certain pressure and attention to meet the more mature person where they are. Please help me understand reality as you understand it. It will never happen in one jump. And that's why a person is not allowed to make those kind of demands of their children. Because you can't suddenly get to reality in one leap. It's a lifetime inching your way towards reality. But there's a reason why somebody who's more mature than I am is called an Av, called a Zaken, is called a Chacham. And why somebody who is less mature than I am is called a Yeled. They are called Yeladim. That is how the Navi, Ima pointed that out, that the Navi says that Rechavam was trying to come up with the right response to the people who said that the tax burden of Shlomo HaMelech had been very hard for them, and they were asking for some relief when Rechavam would take over. And Rechavam consulted with the Zakenim, and he consulted with the Yeladim, and that doesn't mean that he consulted with the children. It means, and the Navi says what it means. It means those people who grew up with him. People who grew up with him. Twice the Navi says that the Yeladim are those who grew up with him. Why is that important to know that they grew up with him? And the answer is because the world can be split between those who are trying to understand reality the way Hashem understands reality, and those who are not trying. And the ones who are not trying, we can understand them very easily. They just want to be successful as they see success and as they define it in their lives. The world is split between those two types of people. The ones who are Yeladim, who are not trying to grow, who are not trying to build their sense of reality to come closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and those who are. I recall Rav Moshe Shapiro once saying that an Am Ha'aretz stops being an Am Ha'aretz the day that he realizes that he's an Am Ha'aretz. And that so much aligns with this sense of a person who is immature, who is a child, starts becoming a Zaken the minute he realizes that he is a child, with his biases, with his moods, with his neediness, with all of the parts of the story that he has not yet come to know and how to handle and use them properly. With the day that he discovers that he's not that, the day that he discovers that he's just a victim of all of his impulses, is the day that he starts becoming a Chacham. So the Am Ha'aretz stops being an Am Ha'aretz the day that he realizes that he's an Am Ha'aretz, and a child, a Yeled, no matter what age, stops being a Yeled on the day that he recognizes that he's a Yeled. And the Yeladim, they are easy to understand. That's why the Navi says they grew up together. But one thing is remarkable. You will never understand a Zaken. A Zaken is always beyond our simple understanding because he has closer grip on reality. And so the Navi tells us that he consulted with the Zakenim and he couldn't get what they were advising him. He couldn't understand. He reduced it. He just thought that it had to do with this tax or this tax. Didn't understand what they were saying because he didn't realize that he was a Yeled. And when he consulted with the Yeladim, he understood them. And that's why he went with a Yeladim, because he didn't yet realize that he was a Yeled. Had he realized that he was a Yeled, he would have stopped being a Yeled, and he would have sought out the counsel of the Zakenim.